So, my friends, I have run into a problem. You may have noticed that for the last couple of months, it seems like no matter what particular subject or issue or theological perspective or you value, that I choose to make it the topic of my sermon. As I am writing and putting it together, I find that I end up circling back to the same single core message. Whether it's Women's History Month, Buddhist spirituality, or environmental advocacy that I am talking about, by the end of every sermon, I find myself returning to the same refrain. And that repeated message is, don't give up. Don't give in. Keep going. You are not alone. Now, perhaps this is just a sign of the times. Perhaps I preach to you what I need to hear myself. Maybe don't give up. Don't give in. You're not alone is a message that we all need to hear over and over right now, especially in our church, even at the risk of being a little repetitive. Now, this morning, I want to spend some time talking about God, or at least some ideas about God. And we'll see where that takes us today. Some years ago, I had the pleasure of serving as the adult advisor for a high school youth group at a Unitarian Universalist church up in Ohio. These teenagers were exploring their spirituality and became curious about what other folks in their congregation believed and the diversity of religious identities represented in their particular UU community. So they came up with a survey and passed it out to everyone one Sunday at the end of a service. This questionnaire contained a long list of diverse theological labels, and folks were asked to check the box beside the term that best described their outlook on such matters. Now, I had been really busy organizing all of this with the youth group, so I had not really thought at all about how I would fill out the survey. Then one of these youth handed it to me, and I had to take a moment to ponder how to respond. Now, this was long before I had ever taken a class in seminary or read much about transcendentalism or liberation theology. So as I looked down the long list of choices, and of course in UU it's going to be a pretty long list, right? I had to admit that I was not sure what some of the options even meant. I remember thinking, what exactly is the difference between a theist and a deist? I mean, I'm not sure that I would call myself a pagan, but I certainly find spirituality in nature. After a few moments of soul searching, and I only had a few moments, I decided to place my check mark beside the box that said agnostic. Now, the term agnostic comes from the Greek word agnosis, which means incapable of being fully known. So to me, at least at the time, it felt like, a pretty safe choice, right? A pretty humble one for sure. And also a reasonably UU way of looking at things. Now, while I cannot prove that there is a God, I do know that there's a lot going on that is a lot bigger than just me. And I also cannot help but feel uncomfortable about declaring the beliefs which so many of my friends and neighbors and fellow citizens of this world hold about the subject of God as just being made-up fantasies. That does not feel respectful or helpful. And it certainly is not Unitarian Universalist. What does feel Unitarian Universalist to me is listening to what other people have to say about God, how others present their version of the divine, what the face of God looks like to them, and also seeing where those beliefs take them. About 25 years ago, when I first met my husband, Jim, he was in the process of searching for a new religion that would work for him. He'd been raised Catholic and was kind of done with that. So whenever I had a Sunday or a Saturday free, I would tag along with him on his frequent church shopping adventures. It was a great way to kind of first date and get to know each other. We went to a small, gay-friendly evangelical church. We went to a quiet Quaker meeting, a big Unity congregation, a Reformed Jewish temple, a very progressive United Church of Christ. Now, going to visit these different congregations with Jim in those days gave me the opportunity to hear a lot of different points of view. One thing that I found that most churches or religious communities seem to have in common is the practice of prayer. Many a time I found myself sitting in a pew or chairs with everyone around me, bowing their heads to have a conversation with their God. For many of these people, prayer is a direct line to heaven, kind of like a person-to-person phone call. That is the way that it is described on the website allaboutprayer.org. The site compares prayer to a smartphone, enabling us to instantly communicate with the Most High, to ask for what we need, and to express our gratitude for what we have. Being there in the pew while everyone around me was busy talking directly to their Creator, well, I got to tell you, it made me a little uneasy. Now, I accept and I honor these folks' beliefs, and I understand the value in the spiritual practice that they're engaged in. But I was still uneasy. I think that it's not what they're doing, but more the words that they're using. Traditional prayer language somehow just has never really worked for me. I just cannot make myself talk to God like she or he or they are a person, or like God is a he or she or they at all. You know, I remember I was in the 5th grade, the year that the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind was first released. How many of y'all remember that movie? Yeah. Well, it made quite an impression on me. And I have to tell you, since then, I have been a firm believer, or at least an optimistic believer, in the existence of extraterrestrial life. But I also think that it's probably not going to be like in Close Encounters or in Star Wars, or dare I even say Star Trek. I think chances are that alien life forms are not going to look like us, probably not even be carbon-based, and maybe even not exist on the same plane of space and time at all. In his book, Evolving the Alien, biologist Jack Cohen debunks the assumption that any form of advanced life out there in the universe has to have similar characteristics to us Earthlings. Cohen calls this attitude self-centered and says that such theories are too restrictive and unimaginative. He argues for ways to rationally and scientifically study what he calls a wide range of alternative alien possibilities. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up being taught that in at least some sense, God is the ultimate extraterrestrial. And along my spiritual journey, I have come to see that vision of God is kind of limiting. For me, cornering our concept of the divine into a person that we can have a chat with feels like creating God in our own image rather than the other way around. So I have concluded that I really just can't see God as a person. But I do believe that I can see God in people. You know, there's a popular singer-songwriter named Joan Osborne, who was born and raised right here in Louisville. And in the late 1990s, she moved to New York City and recorded a popular song called One of Us. The lyrics, which were written by her friend Eric Bazillion, go like this, and they're probably familiar to you. If God had a name, what would it be? And would you call it to his face? If you were faced with him in all his glory, what would you ask if you had just one question? What if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on a bus trying to make his way back home. Back to heaven, all alone. Nobody calling on the phone, except the Pope maybe in Rome. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was scrolling through YouTube, and I happened to just run across the original music video that was made way back in the 1990s for that Joan Osborne song. The video is set at the Coney Island Amusement Park in Brooklyn, New York, which is a place that my dad talks about constantly. My dad grew up on Long Island, and he has fond memories of going to Coney Island when he was a kid on summer afternoons. His aunt would take him, and they'd ride the Cyclone roller coaster together, and of course have a Nathan's hot dog. Well, in the video, there is a photographer's tent set up along the midway. And inside that tent, there is a large reproduction of Michelangelo's famous painting from the Sistine Chapel. The painting has God's face cut out. And as the song plays, a line of people come up one by one and stick their head through that hole to have their picture taken as the face of God. There's an aging man with a long black beard and mysterious mirrored sunglasses. A tough-looking Latina teenager with spiked hair and a whole lot of facial piercings. A large woman in a flowered bathing cap with a twinkling smile. A wide-eyed young girl who laughs as the flashbulb pops. I got to tell you, I found myself really moved by those images in that video. They spoke to me on some deep level. God laughs as the flashbulb pops. I had to think about it. And perhaps that message is, don't look into the sky to see the face of God. Look around you at other people. You know, maybe the message is to not imagine religion or spirituality as a set of abstract concepts or heady ideas, but rather to see it as a web of relationships where the spark of the divine is waiting to be discovered, not simply in each of us, but in that holy space among us. In Unitarian Universalism, we celebrate the truth of our interdependence. We affirm the worth and the dignity of every person. We hold up the supreme value of love and compassion and community. We live this out here at All Peoples in so many ways. When we light candles to honor our sorrows and our joys, when we gather for potluck lunches, when we go out and march in the streets in a spirit of solidarity and resistance. I don't think it's a great leap of faith to see the sacred as being present in our bonds with family and with friends, and our connections to those around us who we like, who share our values and our perspectives about life. It's a little harder, though, when you start to think about everybody else, right? The song asks, what if God is the stranger on a bus? Now, yesterday afternoon, as we were at that huge rally downtown with so many other people from across our city, I saw love. I saw holiness in those there. You know, I feel like I can see God in people whose words and deeds I admire. Folks who are actively working to defend our democracy. Folks who are giving their time and their money to support others who are struggling. Folks who are confronting racism and bigotry. But what about that lady at Costco who's in line in front of me, who's just taken way too long? What about the guy in the Ford Bronco who ran the red light right in front of me this morning on 3rd Street and almost hit me? What about Elon Musk? Now, I mean, there is one guy who is hiding his divine spark under a mighty big bushel these days, right? For over a decade, back in the early 2000s, I managed a bakery in downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. And one of my regular customers at that bakery was this woman who would come in almost every single day. And she could never make up her mind about what she wanted to order. She was really fussy, and she usually always had a problem with whatever she got, right? And then she would take a really long time to open up her wallet and to pay. And now, when you are understaffed and you got a really long line of people and you're trying to keep it moving, people like her are just a giant challenge to that motto, the customer is always right. Well, one day I went back to run her credit card. This was in the old days when you had to go back to run the credit card in the back and not at the register. And as I looked at her credit card, I found out that her name was Grace Love. Now, all I could do was smile and laugh. And when I brought out, her order and her receipt, I thought, how could I be angry and impatient with Grace Love? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus instructed his disciples, "You have heard that it is said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. God makes the sun rise on the bad and the good, causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love only those who love you, what reward will you have? And if you greet your brothers only, what is unusual about that?" The Golden Rule tells us to love thy neighbor. But what if your neighbor yells at you because your dog pooped in his yard? God may be that stranger on the bus, but there are just many afternoons after a long day at work when I would just prefer maybe not to get in a conversation with her, At times like these, I try to remember the words of the Buddha. The Buddha said, imagine that every person in this world is enlightened, but you. They are all teachers, each doing just the right thing to help you learn patience, help you perfect wisdom, help you find compassion. It is not easy, but I often try to look at the people I come across as I go about my day especially those who are the biggest challenges, people like Grace Love. And think to myself, there is a face of God. When I read the news and I witness the real consequences of the cruel and dehumanizing actions that powerful leaders in our nation are taking, and that so many people seem to be going along with and even supporting right now, it is transforming to understand that the whole reason all of this is happening is because they cannot see a face of God in other people. And that is the problem. And what that means is that we have to keep showing it to them. We have to keep inviting others to see what is holy, what is human in us and in everyone through our words and our actions and our attitudes. So, I guess that takes us right back to what I keep saying to you every Sunday. And maybe that's okay. Don't give up. Don't give up on finding the presence of what is good. Don't give in to those who would tell you otherwise. Keep going. Keep seeking out the holiness that is always among us. And you are not alone. You are not alone because we are here together, crying and laughing and getting through this life, seeing a face of God in one another. Amen. And so may it be.